Hello and welcome to Evolving on Purpose, a show I have created in hopes that I can inspire you to take the deep dive into discovering who you are and what you came here to do. Each week, I will have on individuals to share their unique journey to self-discovery and where their purpose is taking them. I will also do solo episodes to share what I am currently learning, practicing, or even just contemplating. So come on, what are you waiting for? Join me in Evolving on Purpose. Hello and welcome. Today I am so excited. I have Angela Bixby on the podcast. She is an intuitive consultant, a consciousness mentor, and a certified psychic medium. She uses her passion for connecting people to their intuition to make sure that they understand how empowered they can be. And I love that so much. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Angela.
Beautiful, beautiful. You're welcome. Thank you for having me here, Angela. It's an honor to be here having this conversation with you today.
Yeah, I just want to jump in because I can't wait to kind of get to really understand you and your story. So if you can just take us back to kind of what your childhood was like and how you got to where you are now, because you didn't grow up just being, Angela Bixby, the psychic medium, right?
Correct. So I grew up on the West Coast. I live now on the East Coast of the US in the Philadelphia area. And I grew up on the West Coast, born in Seattle, grew up in California. I had very cool parents. So you might think that I knew I was psychic my whole life. I'm 55 now, but I didn't. And neither did my parents, 50 some years ago, as I was having the experiences that I was having. I was that kid in the family that always kind of knew things, as well as I was always crying. I was like the emotional barometer for the family. I was not unhappy. I was a very happy child, but just very emotional. And everybody would always sort of look at me and think, gosh, why is she crying again? Like, what's the deal? And, no one knew really that I was that sensitive and what was going on. And so fast forward to having created an adult life, made my way to the East Coast, there's a whole story there, and it was in my career in corporate America and was really just not feeling satisfied. I knew that I was sort of destined for greater things. I looked in a lot of different ways in a lot of different places and weaved my corporate career together in different ways, really trying to meet those needs. And I was also at a time in my life in my 30s, I was very, very open to what might be next, right? Open to maybe I'm an entrepreneur, maybe I'm meant to help people in a different way. Fast forward to when I was in my early 40s. So the early 2000s, around 2010 is when I landed in psychic school. What preceded that for about a year and a half were a lot of different spiritual experiences. So I was one of those people that consumed a lot of the stuff that you and I do, right? I was working with a shaman at the time and doing all kinds of alternative healing for myself, moving through a really empowered time in my life. And I found my way to psychic school in New York, and it was there with my rear in a chair in Manhattan that I first realized I was psychic in my early 40s. And so people are often surprised by that because some people know their whole life when they're growing up that they are. I didn't until I landed there. What ensued was I quickly identified that I had been empathic, an empath my whole life, hence the crying all the time, and that I was claircognizant. So that explained some of the odd things. For instance, I was traveling with my dad one summer in England before I was of driving age, and somehow I navigated us out from being lost in a foreign country as a non-driver. My dad was like, what? I don't know how you did this, right? So I realized that I had been claircognizant and empathic my whole life. From there, I developed all of my clairs. And that's one of the things that I like to share with people and reinforce to people is that we're all psychic. We all have a pineal gland, a pituitary gland in our brains, and we have a physical body, which is our best dividing rod. So we all have the capacity to develop out all of our psychic skills, and I'm living proof of that. Since then, some of that story. I've been doing this work now for 12, 13 years, very passionate about helping people connect to their intuition, which is what I do now in my practice.
Yeah, I love that. I think it brought up a lot because my grandma was just very naturally psychic her whole life. She grew up when she was really little. She could just hear people's thoughts, and so she thought everybody could do it because, of course, why couldn't you? Until she said a couple of things and got in big trouble and realized, like, oh, maybe this isn't okay, and kind of figured out how to switch that off. But I don't know. It's interesting. I always try to pick my mom and my aunts and my uncle's brains about it because I just think it would have been really interesting. But she didn't really get into it until the kids were older. But yeah, there was a story about my mom getting lost in the rain and she thought she was going to be in trouble. And she finally found a phone and she called and she answered, "Cheryl, you're not in trouble," and told her how to get home. And my mom was like, "Oh," she said that was the first time she realized, like, oh, she really, because she was always just like, oh, mom just knows, they thought that was just like, mom just knows things, right? But
Yeah.
I just think that's so interesting. The funny thing is that all of my, like, I was telling my mom about this interview and I was like, oh my gosh, mom, it's on my list. I'm going to work on my gifts. And she's like, I said, oh, it would be good for you too, because she's trying to transition from retirement and figure out her next steps and like what she wants to do. She's thinking about painting and doing all these creative things that she's never allowed herself to do. And I'm like, this would be so good. You could tap into your own intuition, right? Like just tap into your own guides and be led and just live the rest of your life in this very surrendered, led way. And she was just like, I don't think I want to be psychic. And I just thought it was so funny because I think people have this, well, especially because my grandma was such an open channel, they felt some fear about it, right? Either fear in society about what you would be looked at, or fear of, being contacted by people from the other side and not wanting that, right? So can you talk a little bit more about what growing these gifts could look like? It doesn't have to be, you're connecting with every, past relative.
Absolutely, absolutely. You bring up such a great point with the example of your grandmother and your mother, and it's great to hear about that information. I can see why, and your mom holds a view that many people hold. And no disrespect to your mom, but I think a lot of people have a hard time conceptualizing how you can bring boundaries to a process like this and maintain some semblance of not exactly being in charge, but kind of being in charge of what comes through. And I'll qualify that a little bit. I'll tell you more what I mean. I employ a lot of positive psychology. I have a psychology background. I'm not a clinical therapist, but I have an undergrad degree in psychology and a master's certificate in holistic psychology. So point being, I've always been interested in human behavior and the brain and those types of things. It ends up really being helpful, right, in this kind of work because boundaries are really important. And so there's been this perception and this concept out there for many decades, and it's a century or so, really a little over a century since spiritualism was brought from the UK to the US in the early 1900s. So really kind of since it was big around the time of the turn of the last century, right? And here we are 100 years later and going through another kind of renaissance of these sorts of things. The perception was that it sort of comes to you spontaneously and randomly, right? And that there's a lot that goes along with that. People think, oh, okay, well, is it a gift? Am I touched? They have all of this sort of some of the heavy religious and cultural overlays of like, well, I can't renounce this. What do I do with it? They perhaps feel a bit of a martyr or victim. I have to honor this, and they're not sure how to do it, right? And I teach people, the way that I teach people is that we can be directive with this. We don't have to just receive things passively, receptively. And so that's a big game changer for people when they understand that they actually have a little bit more, air quotes, control over this process than they may realize. Now, I also say that from a place of, while I have some spontaneous things happen and I have some things push in from spirit, I've been blessed in that I have not walked around my whole life having dead people trying to get my attention. For me, the process of developing sort of took me down a path in a way. So And I have lots of people come to me that do have spirits talking to them all the time. Those are a lot of my students in my conscious psychic program. Or as you mentioned, like your grandmother, they had this stuff when they were young and then they kind of turned it off. And because of all the reasons that people may want to turn this off, they get those cross looks from their family members, etc. And so I help people safely turn it back on and then employ boundaries and this directive quality, basically, that you can sort of call spirit in, and you can also say, no, not now. I'll give you an example that's a visual. It's similar to, we enjoy on a nice day opening our windows, but we leave the screens down. Would you open up your screens all throughout the year and let all of the bugs and the birds and the critters come into your house?
No, of course not.
Right. So that's really kind of the principle of employing these energetic boundaries within this process. And again, it's not even just subjective, but it's so ethereal and intangible that people do have a hard time conceptualizing that. And that's why, one of my claims to fame is that I offer grounded guidance. Being grounded when you're doing this work is really important so that you can uphold those boundaries and feel as though you do have an empowered relationship with your gifts, your psychic and energetic gifts.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the reasons that I haven't had anybody that is, teaching this or using this on the podcast, just because I do like to keep a really grounded approach to everything. And that was one thing that drew me in about you, was that I did feel this very grounded and this very in this world approach to it. And that's just kind of where I'm at. A lot of people can lose a lot of their life trying to be somewhere else and trying to kind of escape this world. And I just feel like we're here for a reason. And let's really focus our attention on how do we be in this world? How do we take full advantage of the life that we're living? And why not, if something is drawing you, why not have a little guidance? I mean, we were talking the other day, we went into human design and I got to learn your design a little bit. So I'm kind of excited to pull that in, if you don't mind us talking about your design a little bit.
I'm an open book. We can go anywhere, Angie.
Yeah. So for all of you that are kind of learning human design or interested in human design right now, Angela is a 6-2 manifesting generator, which is the same as me. We've got two Angelas, 6-2 manifesting generators. A little bit of a difference though, and this is interesting. Angela is a triple split. And so that's when your circuitry. So we have that circuitry, we have that body graph that shows all those channels. And when they have like a split where they don't all talk, that's one thing. And then if they have triple, you could have a quad. That's the most splits that you could have. But it's not that much of the population. And I love learning more and more and more about how these circuitries. And so it's really interesting for me how you're so good at all of the different clairs. And I know that you've worked on them. And I know that it wasn't just like snap of the fingers, you knew all of this. But you have, like we said, the only thing open in your chart is your solar plexus, which is that emotional, what I call an empath, right? Anybody that is really open in that center and can really feel other people's emotions, and they kind of expand. And I have all empaths in my house. My husband and both my kids are all emotionally open. So I get to watch this a lot. And yeah, it's not that they're unhappy, but they just feel the emotions of others stronger. My one son, if his friends get upset, he almost has a panic attack, right? Like his one friend dropped his head to his desk because he was upset about something. And my son had a panic attack. He had, we talk about it and we know what tools. And so he went and walked the halls and calmed down, but he just knows like he can't handle that much emotion at a time. He's learning how to deal with that. And my other son is, he's the crier. He cries about everything and then he's fine, right? It moves through him and then he's fine. And so I just think it's super interesting how you shared about that, and how anybody, if they want to look at their chart and if they see that little solar plexus on the right is not colored in, then they too have that expansive emotions. But you have this really strong mind with the 43 at the bottom, kind of ready for insight at any time. And I think that's that real download that you get, right? Like that intuitive download from the mind. And then you have a splenic 57 sticking up that's like an instant yes or no. Is this safe? Is this not? I don't know if that would be any of the clairs. And then you have this
clairsentience, feeling it in your physical body. Sorry, interjecting
yeah,
that.
yeah. And you have that the solar plexus has two little I kind of wonder if something, these hanging gates, right? These hanging gates where we have openness on one side and we have energy on the other can't help us kind of pull in. But I just find it so fascinating when you're talking about these gifts and then looking at the chart. We were talking how they're both tools, right? Like we're using these as a tool to help us in our lives, to help empower us, to help understand ourselves, and yeah, I just love how parallel they are. So I'm an outer vision person in human design. That means that using my eyes to look out gives me a ton of information. And so using a human design chart for me is like, it kind of when I first, because my grandma was so psychic, and she could just hear a name and tell you all about that person. I look at a chart and I kind of feel the same way. It's just,
Yes.
it's so fun to kind of play with these things, but for a reason, right? Like we're not just doing it just a party trick. This is like transformational for people's lives and for our lives, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I find, not to overuse the phrase, but I find that there's so much empowerment in these tools that you and I both work with. And in this day and age, with how crunchy things have gotten in the world, you'll just leave it at that, right? On all the levels, a lot of things are just not as certain as they used to be. And as I help people connect to their intuition, the biggest byproduct that I see in my students is an increase in confidence in all areas of their life. And so just as you said that you haven't actually spoken to, and I'm honored to be interviewed by you on your podcast, you haven't necessarily had this conversation yet with people that teach this. I agree. There can be a lot of ungroundedness in the fields that we're talking about, in these tools that we're talking about. And the irony is that they sort of light up these parts of ourselves that we've had for centuries as humans, thousands of years, epochs, etc. And we're meant to sort of remember and use and retool and figure out what's out there and available to us for us to live a more fulfilled life, for us to become better humans, obviously for people that are growth oriented and interested in becoming better humans. There are so many tools, even beyond psychic skills and human design, right, that serve this kind of purpose. So I see it as an honor to be a bit of a wisdom keeper, an elder, carrying these teachings forward and helping people understand that they have access to all of these things to live a more grounded, empowered life on this earth at this time in history when things are so uncertain.
And I think it is really good to be able to find somebody like you that is grounded in this approach, because like you said, there are some people that maybe are overwhelmed with these gifts that are just coming in, and you can help with that. I remember my grandma was always going to hold all of the grandkids and tell us how to make sure to protect ourselves and all of this. And I think she might have one time, but she always would say, "Oh, I need to make sure that you guys know this." And I don't know if we ever got like a real good, lecture on this. And it's so important, especially if it's coming in, but also if you want to work on this, to have guidance, right? If you want to be in control, because I feel like the time is kind of over for looking outside of ourselves for the answers. And that was a big thing, right? We kind of it was kind of taken from us, right? We had, I think it's interesting. So my son, his friend had a headache and he wasn't feeling well. And I knew he probably had or he had told me he'd had Tylenol before, and I had some, but I don't take it. And so I tried to give that to him and he couldn't swallow the pills. And I was like, well, I got homeopathy. So So I gave him some homeopathy and pressed all of his points, on his head, and the headache was gone. And he looked at my son and was like, "Well, what was that?" or whatever. And my son said, "I think my mom's a wizard." And I just thought it was so funny because a wizard is a male, and a witch would be the female, but that word has such a negative connotation for most people that he wouldn't even call me that, right? Like, because he didn't think it was a negative thing. And it's just so interesting how we used to intuitively know, how to heal ourselves and how to, kind of guide ourselves through this world. And it was kind of taken away and said, no, you have to follow this. You have to follow this teaching, or you have to, and you couldn't even just connect to God. It was like you had to go through somebody, right? And I just feel like that's all ending, but we just have to make sure that we're finding the right ways about it, because there's a lot of not so great teachers out there too. It's an interesting change that's going through, and I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited that people are getting more empowered, right? And understanding. And you had a really beautiful, I haven't gotten to do your meditations yet because my kids are on spring break and it's a little crazy here.
Understandable.
But I read the newsletters that you send out, and you had this really beautiful picture. It was like a chair in a library, but all of the wisdom was coming from this like body of water down. And that's, I don't know, that just kind of encompasses all of this, right? Can you talk a little bit about this, if everybody hasn't or heard this, all wisdom comes from within, right? Even all the books that we read, right? They came from within somebody, not from outside. Can you talk about a little bit about using the inner wisdom and maybe some examples for us of what tapping into our own inner wisdom could look like?
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for reminding me about that beautiful visual. Yeah, and what was coming to me when you talked about the visual from one of my newsletters of the knowledge coming across the water, kind of going into us, is that we're all in this state of remembering. We're all at different levels. And so, people that have dreams that they feel like it was a past life version of themselves, or people that have deja vu, or people land at a place where they just feel like they know things that they didn't know before. All of those are examples of kind of this bigger remembering of that we're all connected to source, essentially, that we're all kind of in this together. And so sometimes I describe the process of opening up those channels within us and expressing this as a remembering, right? Because you're right, these are things that we've had available to us for as long as we've been human, that were sort of taken away from us. And when I landed in psychic school, I didn't really know where all this was going to go. I was working in healthcare and sales and marketing in a very conservative industry, single mom of a couple of kids. But I knew that it was really important for me to teach people to connect to their intuition. And even when I started doing readings and things, I remember one of my sons said to me in their, youth and naivety, you keep saying you want people to not have to come to you for this, kind of oracular experience, right? Like you want them to be able to do it for themselves. Aren't you going to put yourself out of business? And I said, but yeah, that's okay. That's a really good thing, right? The more people that are connected to these tools within themselves and sort of have them turned on and clicked in, the better off the world is going to be, right? Because yes, the truth all lies within us, and we have access to that through our physical body, through our pineal gland, through our pituitary gland. I think about psychic development from kind of a consciousness standpoint, and the way I think about consciousness, aside from the fact that I would define it as awareness plus choice, is like we're accessing these fields of information sort of with our brain, and that's sort of how I describe our capacity to access these things that do come from within, but they also sort of move through us, and we can glean understanding as these sort of fields move through us, if you will. And that may be a little out there for the audience, but Spirit wanted me to rig that through, so I wanted to talk about that. for just a moment, in case anyone relates to that and feels connected to that. So the benefits of this really are, as I said earlier, increased confidence in all areas of your life. There's nothing that compares to, I mean, I sit in a very, very, very cool place. I get to witness people having these huge ahas as they open up to their gifts. And confidence, feeling more empowered are probably the biggest byproducts. Think about if anybody listening to the podcast is facing a big decision in their life, perhaps a career change, perhaps a move to a different geography, any of the things that we go through as humans, just as we would go to friends, maybe to bounce something off of them or have a conversation with them about, you know me well, does this make sense? All the reasons that we turn to our friends sometimes for guidance or as a sounding board. When you are connected to your intuition and this depth of this well of inner knowledge, you're able to feel into those experiences yourself and really treat it almost like your own best friend within you, is what I would say. And that's so helpful. I mean, when I think about how many times I went to job interviews and before we had cell phones, and so I didn't have access to my best friend. I didn't think I had access to my intuition. I wasn't even thinking about it. But there's so many moments in life where having that capacity to really ground and feel into what feels and seems right to us is invaluable. And it really ripples out to all areas of our life, including the benefits.
Yeah. That's what I always teach in human design. Human design, my favorite thing is it teaches you that your mind is not here for decision making. Like it's not. It's really good at mental processing and coming up with the words needed to have this conversation and all of these things. But the mind's not here to make decisions. It's the body wisdom, right? And so how do we tap into what's right for you? Whether, because I'm an emotional in human design, that means I have this emotional wave that gives me a really high high and a really low low.
Oh la la.
Yeah. And so every time I get really excited, I think I can take on the world. And then maybe the next day or 2 days later, it drops into a really low low where that idea is terrible and everything's terrible. The whole world is falling apart. I have no energy for it. But if I just kind of ride the ride and know that, okay, here's some excitement. I'm a manifesting generator. You're a manifesting generator. Excitement is kind of what leads us, right?
Yeah.
So the excitement is leading me. The low is giving me time to contemplate and making me slow my roll.
And integrate.
Then, yeah. And then I come to a calm and I can take action, right? And so just understanding that is so helpful. But other people have this splenic where something like this, leaning into this, really quieting and getting, because the spleen whispers. And not everybody knows how to quiet enough to hear that whisper, right?
Yeah. It's a big challenge for a lot of people in this day and age. Yeah. The busy mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of distraction at any time. I can pick up my phone and get a dopamine hit by scrolling on something. It is really easy to get distracted, but that's one thing I'm noticing that, and I've got this kind of idea percolating about putting together all of the things out there that are free, right? Like intuition is free. Meditation is free. Breath work is free. Setting an intention before you drink your water is free. Movement is free. Taking a walk, moving your body. All of these things make the biggest change in our lives, and they're all free. Like we just think that we need all this stuff. Oh, I just need this. Oh, this next thing. And it's like, do we need all this stuff, or can we? And that's why you're probably not so worried about being put out of business, which obviously there's always going to be people that need to learn, right? And that's the same with me. I don't want people just coming to me like I'm have all the knowledge for them, right? Like really, they should only need a chart reading once, because we're tapping in, we're giving them the keys to their own intuition. And then they should be able to go off with it. And that's what I'm looking for. My next chapter is how to teach this too, because I want to teach people to fish just like you. I mean, We are 6 lines though. So if anybody's out there and you're a coach and you love having clients come to you all the time, you're probably a 5 line, right? Like, and coaches 5 lines really love to do it for you. They want to fix, they want to take care of, they want to do it. And we're 6 lines. 6 lines are like, no, I will give you the wisdom and let you fly, right? Like, we do not want people to rely on us for anything, right? We want to give them the power back.
Correct. Thinking about what you said about hearing that whisper of the splenic line. Is that what you called it? Yeah. I'm not as great with the references to human design. So thank you for checking me on the language on that. Listening to the whisper and it being really hard for people to quiet their minds. That's a big question that people ask me often, is how do you tell the difference between your intuition and your thoughts? And you also hit on it earlier, Angie, when you talked about the wisdom of the body. And so that would be a differentiating factor in that place. If you feel like your mind's really busy and you're like, is this my intuition? Is this a hit? Am I supposed to follow this thought? Listen to what you feel in your body. I encourage people to drop out of their head and really be in their body. And then also to pay attention to the quality of the thoughts, because if things come in kind of a stressed or negative way, that's not your intuition. By and large, our intuition is a really calm, possibly quieter voice within us that we actually feel open with. Whether it's a positive or a negative message, we can feel that wisdom in our body almost. Whereas sometimes stressful and anxious thoughts will feel really clenched up in our body, right? So that would be a really basic way to begin to discern what's your intuition versus anxiety and such, or thoughts that are not very helpful.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would love to share for a moment, if I may, with your audience is people are blown away when they come into the Conscious Psychic program. It's the consciousness, it's called the Conscious Psychic program. People develop with me for a year, sometimes more. When they come into the program, they're blown away that they've already had these skills. A lot of times it's really just kind of a reframing of them. So for instance, I had a person come through a couple of years ago. She studied with me for a few years. She's a forensic psychologist. And, in a really, it's kind of high level position. And she didn't think that she could see psychically. And as she was working with me and working with the group, I was talking about, the images that she was seeing in her mind's eye. And she was like, wait a minute. I've always had that. You mean that's my clairvoyance? And I said, yeah, that capacity to imagine or visualize things in your brain, like when you're reading a book or when someone's telling you a story and you're sort of conjuring up visions in your mind, that's your clairvoyance. That's exactly the pathway that your clairvoyance expresses through. So often if you're sitting in a situation, maybe you're sitting in a meeting with someone who you're not really sure kind of what their agenda is. You know what they're saying, but you have a sense that there might be some other hidden agenda. If you sort of tune into what your mind is showing you about the person, as though you're sitting in a movie theater chair and you're kind of sitting back and just watching, so to speak, as opposed to engaging thinking, right? Because that's then where it'll get confusing too. But if you sort of lean back and just pay attention to what's coming onto your mind's eye, you're tapping into your clairvoyance at that moment. Like, it's really a lot of these things people already have, they just don't recognize them as their psychic skills because they're so subtle. So I wanted to offer that, especially when you said whisper, because that's also how clairaudience comes in, right? So I think we can all relate to the experience of getting a song stuck in your head, having an earworm. Sometimes we'll wake up with a song on our mind. That is our clairaudience. And so if you hear something persistently in the back of your head, like song lyrics or a song, pay attention to either the title of the song, the lyric that keeps looping, or the name of the band. And there's likely a message in that for you. Your guides are giving you a message clairaudiently. So really, when people discover that this process is simpler than they thought, that can bring down a lot of barriers and resistance to developing and getting to a place where they can feel empowered with these skills.
Yeah. And it just kind of makes me think about any time that I kind of unplug a little bit from the outside world and I'm just sitting in awareness. All I am is I'm kind of being mindful, right? I'm waking up and I'm mindful. Maybe I meditate, maybe I move my body. I have a intention to be mindful. I have an intention to be in awareness. that's all it takes for me to all of a sudden see all of the repeating numbers. I'm seeing, the 1111s, the 22s all over, like I'm seeing all the numbers. I'm all of a sudden opening to a page and it's like, oh, and it just happens that all I had to do was be a little bit intentional to quiet the outside world a little bit, to come within. And my husband, he's a fantasy football. He goes to work, he's a salesman. Like, he's not into this stuff at all. But I got him to meditate one time with this. It's kind of, he was in a band. It's this Kenneth drums and boom, boom, boom. He feels so good when he does it, that he meditates all the time now. And he says when he does it, I mean, every morning before he goes to work, if he does it every morning, he sees all of the synchronicities all day long. And he's like, this is crazy. But, as he's listening to the football podcast and going to work and doing regular life, but he just feels more connected. And that's all we need sometimes, right? It's just a little bit more connection to I don't this inner wisdom. I always say human design kind of gives us a map, or we have the GPS system inside of us, right?
Exactly. I love hearing the benefits of that, and that he's found the benefits of that for himself. That's the other thing. Sometimes when people come to me to do psychic development, and maybe you run into this too with your human design clients, they often seem to come with the concept that it's going to be really complicated. And they might think that I'm going to say to them, you need to meditate a certain way for an hour a day, 7 days a week. And I tell people, in the context of psychic development or intuitive development, meditation is, as you said earlier, to really just quiet your system down so that you can perceive what you're already perceiving. Yeah. So that you can really just kind of remove some of the noise. There's a client who's been working with me for a number of years, and she trance-channeled. She went from sort of not perceiving much, and then 6 months later started trance-channeling, and has been trance-channeling since. But she strongly dislikes meditation. And her process was more about a little bit of mindfulness when she was walking or moving through her day or cleaning, what have you. And so, just so that the audience understands, there's so many different ways to access this kinds of information, and it doesn't have to come with a lot of perceived barriers of like, oh, I'm going to have to become, like a monk. No, not at all. It's far more accessible than that for everybody.
Yeah. And just knowing, and I think that's half the battle is being around people that you can kind of commune with, and that's one thing that you're really, really good at. You have a lot of tribal circuitry in your human design, and it's like, let me gather my tribe, let me bring my people together, let me help them. You got I always call it the queen bee, which my son has too, like kind of the queen, like a little directing, but it's because you know what's good for your tribe. You know how to help them. You know how to get them there. And so I love that you've kind of taken this role, and you're doing it. You're putting yourself out there for the world in service. You're such a service-based person, and I love that so much. Can you tell us a little bit about your programs? Because I'm really excited. I'm a manifesting generator. I'm kind of a junkie for knowledge. So there's already a few classes that I'm going to have to take. And then I would love to join one of your longer containers at some point. But just tell us a little bit about what you have out there.
Yes. So I have a couple of courses that are available on my website. An empath toolkit, which offers you a lot of energy hygiene things, as well as a spirit guide course and a growing yourself psychic self-study, as well as some meditations and activations that I channeled and I do the vocals on, channeled from spirit. And then really what I'm passionate about is the conscious psychic program, that bigger container. And the crux of it is experiential. So when you do decide to enroll with me, to work with me in the conscious psychic program, that bigger, longer term container, you get all of those courses and activations and things on my website. But I don't, and there is also a membership area where there are some resources, but I feel really strongly about not making it didactic heavy, because we all have so many courses that we've bought, and things that we would like to do and books we would like to read and podcasts we would like to listen to, all of the things. And we've really got kind of a glut of information that, and I don't want people to feel as though they've got to add things to their list and then they start out already being behind, right, for things that they haven't completed yet. So the crux of my program is experiential, where I run 5 development circles a week on Zoom audio. We don't even get onto video because that can be really distracting for developing your psychic skills. And so it really encourages people to go deep within them while we're in the circle environment on the phone, I'll call it. And having those experiences of being with your peers after I've led us through a grounding meditation and done all the things, created sacred space, we basically just, everybody's reading each other. I'll set up segments of time and we're focusing on one person for 10 minutes and then the next, etc. And in that space, when people who don't even really deem themselves very psychic are sitting there and they're having an experience of maybe hearing wings fluttering in their ears, feeling a sense of peace in their heart, and then one of their peers delivers a message to someone saying, I'm seeing a white dove with a eucalyptus branch in its mouth, and I'm sensing that you've got a big wave of peace coming into your life. That newer student who is sitting there hearing the wings, feeling peace inside of them, is going to go, oh my gosh, I'm psychic. I had a similar message coming through. That right there is the crux of my program, that experiential learning. Because in that moment, the student is thinking, I'm not just psychic because I bought into Angela, I enrolled into Angela's container and she told me I was. Like, they're really learning that for themselves. They're really tapping into the experiences of that inner wisdom and their intuition in ways that nothing could teach them any better than that. So I really lean on experiential teaching. I feel it's the best way for us to expand into these skills, because while I'm teaching it, while people are having experiences, they're understanding immediately. I don't make noise when I snap. That's one little bit of trivia about me. Never learned how to do that one. That right there teaches them and expands them in ways that no book or no course could ever do for them. So I set things up that way, I facilitate in that fashion so that people can really have those experiences. They can go to the depths of what they need to and then start to connect those dots in terms of how applicable that can be to their life.
I love that so much. I agree that I think that there's something that we're missing in this new online world, is not only getting to interact with your peers and getting that experience, but yeah, the coming together and the experience of working together to we're all in this together. I've definitely signed up for quite a few things everybody's selling, oh, find your tribe. And then you come and it's just them talking, right? You don't interact with anybody else the entire time. And what I'm hearing is that you're interacting together. You're in this together. You're growing together with everybody. Everybody's kind of on this even playing field that they're interacting together.
Absolutely.
I just think that's something that we're really, really missing right now, because we're living separate lives, and we have access to this way to come together with people that are really wanting to be in the same boat together, and we can do it. We just have to find the right things and listen to that intuition and be drawn to the right experiences.
Absolutely. And so there's a lot of wisdom sharing, I would say, that happens in the circles in my program. And that's not to say that anyone is offering advice to each other. Yeah. Because I take those kinds of boundaries seriously in the context of the program, and that it isn't necessarily a platform for people to come in and either judge each other or try to say, well, let me tell you how it is, right? Mm-hmm. And it's about really connecting to those psychic gifts. And when you have something to say that feels like it comes through your intuition, then you offer that to someone. And yeah, the exponential learning from peers in the community is really, it's incredible. It's a beautiful process. So I like to think, I know that from the feedback from my students, that they do have very nourishing and enriching and supported experiences when they choose to walk with me in this container.
Yes. And if somebody didn't want to work on their gifts right now, but wanted to get a little bit more information about themselves, or you also do readings, correct?
Correct. I do.
Yes. And I will say, we met, I think it was last week, and you brought my grandmother through for me. So thank you again for that. It was
You're
such a
welcome.
wonderful experience. And yeah, I definitely full-heartedly say, if you're wanting a little bit of information or just wanting to dip your toe in this, Angela's a great resource for that, for sure.
Thank you, Angela. And I appreciate the way that you present and teach me about human design too. You've been so helpful.
Yeah,
I
I,
appreciate your gifts and
I
your
love
wisdom
it.
and the way that you tap your wisdom. Yeah, sorry.
It's just one tool, though. That's what I always say. I don't hold anything too hard, right? That's I think that's the gift that
Amen.
I'm learning is I thought that there was one way, right? I thought that there was like, I'm gonna find the path and I'm gonna teach it and it's gonna be great. And then I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Not only is everybody so different, right? We are all
Mhm.
so different, but the answers are so simple. It's kind of like the universe, everybody is kind of laughing at me a little bit from my youth. Yeah. And now they're like, see, it is so easy. There is so much joy and ease and surrender and flow in this world, and it's about subtracting, not about adding a bunch of stuff.
Agreed wholeheartedly.
Well, this was so much fun getting to know you and getting to share a little bit more about this. So, if anybody is just curious, what's the best way to reach you or look you up?
Yes, my website, energyintuit.com. So that's energyintuit.com. Go there, check out the Cosmic Hive. You'll find the courses, you'll find information about sessions, etc. And from there, you can sign on to my newsletter if you'd like to receive notifications about events and offers and things like that.
Yes, and I will say I do love the newsletter, so I would suggest anybody sign up
Thank you.
for the newsletter. You will enjoy it. It won't just be something that you have to delete. Like, so,
Thank you. Yeah, I love to write. So I'm glad to hear that you enjoy the newsletter.
yes, yes. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I love getting to share people like you with the world. I hope everybody checks Angela out, or maybe just got a little bit more clear on maybe where they're already using their intuitive gifts, and they can lean into that a little bit and not be so afraid that they don't have that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do intend and hope that people received inspiration from our conversation. It's been a joy to talk to you today, Angela. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. If you enjoyed what Angela had to say and want to learn more, all of her information is in the show notes. Go check her out. And if you haven't had a human design reading yet, you can always go to evolvingonpurpose.org and sign up there. I do them all via Zoom, so you can do them from anywhere around the world. Get your life purpose, or maybe just understand your energy and what you came here, all the gifts that you came here with. And it's that time of year. There's all of the seniors graduating, or maybe you have a college grad and they're a little bit confused about their next step. Having a human design reading is a wonderful way to give them a little bit more clarity on their gifts and what they can really lean on for their strengths. So go ahead and check that out at evolvingonpurpose.org. And as always, keep evolving on purpose.